What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning into the Mishmash podcast. Today, my guest is Miss Lauren Christ, Elementary School Educator, Assistant Varsity Basketball, and Freshman Volleyball Coach at Raritan High School. Miss Christ, thanks so much for coming through.
Thanks for having me.
I think it goes without saying that you're a celebrity in these parts, as you saw by Jackson's greeting.
I know. He's lovely. Lovely.
It's kind of cool for me to see how much he appreciates you, even still now in 5th grade. And that's not going to change. I think you're cemented as like the all-time favorite teacher.
Oh, I love that.
Which is great. And it's funny too, because it was 2nd grade. So, I mean, I guess everybody has a different like background experience with school. Mm-hmm. But for me, 2nd grade was like the worst year of elementary school. It was the weirdest. Like, unfortunately, we had a teacher who was like very much like old school. Like, she was a terror. And it turns out that she had like a medical condition. She didn't even like make it through the school year. We had like 12 different subs. It was crazy.
Chaos.
So I'm happy that Jackson, can look back on 2nd grade as his all-time favorite.
Oh, that's awesome.
But before we jump into like the teaching stuff, I remember your first day because I saw it on TV.
Yep.
Which was pretty cool and not a common experience for most.
No.
If you're interested in discussing that a little bit, I have like a parallel anecdote from my end. But how did that come about? Was it News 12 or
NJ.com.
Okay, NJ.com.
Yeah. So basically, I got hired. It was a whirlwind process. I actually interviewed right before I graduated college and I was denied. So I didn't get a demo lesson. I wasn't asked to move on in the interview process. So that was devastating for sure. And another job had come up in kindergarten. So I said, honestly, I just want to be in the school district. I'm just going to go for it. So I did. And during that process, I got a call from our principal and she said, hey, someone dropped out. Are you interested? So I said, yeah, of course. I would love that. And I knew it was 2nd grade, so I was thrilled. And after that, I did a demo lesson, was hired the next day. And then the following day, they called me up and said, hey, since you're from the area, would we be able to record you on your first day? You're a hometown kid, it's COVID, all of those things. So I said, sure, why not? I didn't know what it would entail. It was very stressful, but it was a great experience. And I have that to look back on. So
Right. I mean, I guess that's my fault for leaving out that key detail. You started when? What school year?
2021.
Yeah, 2021, like the heart of everything. Yes. I just remember how topsy-turvy it was. So for us, we'll get to this later too. So I was running the rec basketball program for Hazlitt from 2019 into 2020. So we wrapped up the day before school shut down.
Wow.
So that whole week was just a whirlwind of like trying to make sure we got all the basketball stuff done, but worrying about what was happening with school. And so the rest of that school year, obviously that was crazy because everything went virtual and everyone was home all the time. But to me, the following 2 school years were really the challenging ones because everybody was just trying to figure it out. What's going to happen? How is this going to work? So like, I give you a lot of credit for coming into the profession. So I haven't taught professionally in years, but to me, parenting and coaching, they're all sort of flavors of the same, same dish. But it takes a special person, I think, to come into the education field, especially over the last 5 or 10 years. So kudos to you for stepping up. And I mean, it runs in the family, right? Because your mom is also upper elementary.
Yes, she's 5th grade.
5th grade, okay, at Beer Street, right?
Yes.
And then your sister literally just graduated, right?
Yesterday.
To go into education.
Yes, she's educational psychology though. So she's kind of on the back end, especially with special education, all of the testing, those things. She just found that super interesting. So
does that contribute to like IEP development and stuff?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, congratulations to her. And that's great. No,
yeah.
It's funny. I feel like there's one of 2 things that happens when you grow up as a child of at least one teacher, and you either fall for it hardcore and love it and go, or you run as far in the opposite direction as you can go.
100%. What's funny is I went into college. Obviously, I was playing basketball, those things, but I was a nursing major.
Oh, really?
That was my original path. I went to our first lab, and they were talking about drawing blood, and I have a huge fear of that. So I said, never mind. My whole thing was I wanted to help children, and I wanted to be a pediatric nurse. And after that, I said, there's other ways I can do that. Immediately switched to teaching, and here I am. So
that's great. And pediatric nurse in terms of like a school nurse, or just like more geared towards kids in general?
Geared towards kids in general. The ideal situation was a doctor's office. Like, I loved that atmosphere. Even when I was little, going as a sick kid, I was like, oh, they're so nice and lovely. So I wanted to do that too. So
shout out to Miss Oxy.
Yes.
She's we've had plenty of phone calls to and from over the years that my 3 kids went through through the system.
Yes,
definitely. Wow. That's a big shift. Was the interest in nursing something that you came to through, high school, or I guess you said it was sort of.
Yeah, so I just loved kids and I wanted to be around that, and I thought the best way to help them was in the medical field. So that's what I wanted to do. And of course I grew up with a mom who's a teacher, and I've heard a lot of stories. My mom started in Jersey City and then ended up in Hazlitt. So big span of teaching experience. So a lot of on my other side of the family, they're all nurses. So I saw that. I saw how they loved and cared for their patients. And I was like, that's something I want to do because, again, especially with children. But then as my mom talked about it, all those things, I rethought my path and said, oh, this is perfect for me. I think I'm meant to be a teacher for sure.
So that's wild because that exact scenario has been on my mind lately with my daughter, Sarah. So Sarah has sort of the opposite scenario. So she fell in love with, she's wanted to be a kindergarten gym teacher since she had Miss V over at Sycamore, however many years ago. Yeah. And I mean, adamant. And the way she framed it was, when my basketball career is over, then I want to go and be a kindergarten gym teacher, which is great. And, I knew, and for the same reasons, she loved working with kids. She loved all of that. But, we've had discussions of late, which is like so weird to think about. She's a rising 8th grader. So now we're talking about like the Raritan open houses and just all these different things. And so, we've had to have some more, discussions. I'm a big believer in supporting kids in general and their beliefs. It's so easy to have your dreams squashed. I mean, I kind of dealt with that at various points as a kid, as I think anybody does. Yeah. And so you have teachers who are influential, or parents or relatives or whoever, who, either support your dream or crush it. And you either work it because of them or no, thanks to them.
Definitely.
And so with my kids, whatever they wanted to do, I wanted to support them. And so this discussion that Sarah and I had was, it's more, what are the motivations for it? What do you want to get out of it? So she loved working with kids and things like that. But she loves school. I think she's got an extra gear if she wanted to try to push for something different. And so we talked recently about the medical field. And so it's funny that she may be shifting from education into something medically related. Yeah. Sports. We've talked about sports medicine or being like a team doctor or something to that effect. So we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
As long as the biggest thing is, as long as you're happy, then that's good.
100%.
And for what it's worth, you seem pretty happy with your job, and
I love it. There are definitely tough days, and you don't really realize until you're in it. I remember even with student teaching, there were tough days, but it wasn't the same thing because you were protected. There's always someone there that was guiding you, mentoring you, but then when you're in it, you're just in it, and it's you, and you're making the decisions, you're calling the shots. It's very overwhelming. But when you do love it, you are happy. It's when you don't love it, it becomes, in anything, not just teaching. It's tough. So, and it's hard decisions for especially young kids. You're 18, picking what you want to do for the rest of your life. It's hard. So. And,
for what it's worth, like your mom's reputation in town as a teacher is as good as yours is, right? And it's great because it shows that she still has the passion for it, even after all this time in the field. And that's something special because not everybody, I'm assuming everybody at some point hits a wall and everybody reaches a point where they know that they're done. Yep. But unfortunately, there are some teachers, and you probably had this coming through the system as well, some teachers reach that point of being done too soon and don't leave. And 100%. Then those are the miserable teachers, the ones that take it out on the students. And
100%.
That's not a fun situation.
For anyone. And it's sad because when they're so unhappy, and it's so evident, and the poor kids, obviously they're just there to learn, and all kids, when they come in, especially, I mean, at any level really, because even, I know we'll get into it with coaching and things, they just want to be loved and they want to make you proud. And when you don't give that to them, it's a really tough spot.
So it's funny. I mentioned off microphone or whatever that like I'm a big people person, and I have friends of, you name it, all over the place. And one of them, funny enough, was a crossing guard at Cove Road. This guy Mike, who's older than me, old enough to maybe be my dad or somewhere thereabouts. And so we had just went to a concert recently, and he brought a friend along. And I guess that guy worked at like the Rahway prison or some big time like jail thing. And he said there was somebody new that came into the system and was asking him for advice. And he said, the one thing I can tell you is when it comes to the inmates, like, don't let whatever anybody else's thoughts or feelings are influence yours. Like, give everybody a fair shot, make up your own mind. And that's something that I think just great life advice in general, but I think it's really important as a teacher. especially as you get older, like further along, right? So the kids, if you're teaching second grade now, first, second grade, there's not a terribly huge amount of information on these kids available. But I know by the time they hit Jackson's age, fifth grade, sixth grade, some kids have reputations. Some kids have, track records or files or whatever. And when I was teaching in the city, the school itself, I've mentioned this a bunch of times here, the school itself was in Gramercy, which is like a bougie area in Manhattan, but the kids came from the worst parts of Brooklyn and the Bronx or whatever. And it was intimidating. Some of them had parole officers, some of them were on probation. Like, it was crazy. But at the end of the day, like you had said earlier, like, they're just kids. Like, they're still people. And so treating them that way, I found, was a much better way of like gaining their respect. Because discipline is a big thing. And that is a question that I have for you in a second about how to wrangle up all the youngsters. Because again, I mean, I give you tons of credit for just being a teacher in general, but the thought of having the responsibility of laying the foundation at the ages that you work with, man, like that daunts me. Like, I'd rather have the kids that have parole officers or bring weapons to, like, I can find a way to like reason with them, but like the thought of like a kindergartner or a first grader saying no and just being done, I don't know how I could handle that. So credit to you for that.
Thanks. It's funny. I always think of it as that they're still learning. So there are things that obviously we as adults know right and wrong, or yes and no, or what we are expected to do versus what we don't have to do. Those things, they don't know. So, like, who am I to get upset or angry with them when they're still trying just to figure out the world? They don't even know who they are. They're just figuring it out. So I think, and we hear this all the time in professional development, and a lot of people roll their eyes and get upset, but I really do think this is important. We go back to the love thing. If they know you love them, they will do anything for you. My mom and I always say, like, we can get some kids probably to run through a brick wall if we ask them to, because we just make them know that we care and we want to know about their life. And it's so easy when they're little. I mean, they'll come up to you and tell you stories all day long if you let them. But also, if you're a listener, again, just the caring aspect is so important, because I always say September is a little awkward. They don't know how to act. They don't know what's going on. They don't know you. You don't know them. And I also am a big believer in, some teachers are very reserved and they don't tell them about their personal life. They don't give them any kind of other outside information. I don't care. I'll tell them about anything going on, obviously appropriately, but I'll tell them about anything going on, what I'm doing. Like, this year I just got engaged, and that was like a big thing. They love that. They love to be a part of that, and they just feel a part of you. So I really, truly haven't had crazy behavior problems, because there is a way to reach them, and then you're able to reason with them and just say, hey, do we think that's the best choice to make right now? And then they realize, no. And that's it. And that's that. And we're done. So, and it's gotten easier. My first year with Jackson's group, it was definitely hard to manage that and kind of gauge, okay, where should I step in? Where should I let them learn? Things like that. But now, this is my fourth year, so it's definitely gotten a lot easier. It's hard, though. It really is hard. And sometimes there is no reasoning, and that's when you have to step in as the adult and be like, no, this is what we're going to do, right, going forward. But we make mistakes, and that's okay.
Well, for what it's worth, my wife and I are so appreciative of how you approached things with Jackson. It really was wild that was your first year, because of like sort of the aplomb that you brought to the table, because we're blessed that all three kids, took to school and do well, but it's sort of a double-edged sword, because in the wrong hands or the wrong, educational environment, sometimes they're left to coast, right? Or they're utilized as a tool to help these other kids pick up the slack. And we'll never forget you coming to us and telling us, hey, I see where he's at. I don't want him to coast. I want to get him to the next level. I want to challenge him. And that's something that I think has, really propelled him forward. So awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, congratulations on the pending nuptials. That's exciting.
Yes, thank you.
Is your fiance from local too?
Yes,
that's cool.
We went to high school together. Yes.
Oh, wow. That's so awesome. And it is, right? It's a really difficult line that you really don't want to blur too much in terms of like the private life and stuff. It's a little different, I think, with the younger kids. I think it's tougher if you're like a high school teacher,
Definitely.
Especially with social media and everything. You really have to be careful, with what's out there.
Yes.
But to the point, Like, I remember when Miss O got engaged, right? That was a huge deal. Like the kids,
Yeah.
I obviously I've never been in the class with her, so I don't
Right.
know, how much she divulged to the kids, but she seemed to be comfortable as well.
Yeah.
And to the extent that I know Sarah and some of the girls wound up being invited to come for, part of the wedding
Yeah.
ceremony. Like, so it is cool. Like you don't need to be completely shut off
No.
and I think it works to your advantage, at least to open up somewhat, because it engenders the same, like reciprocation from the kids, but it humanizes you too. You're not
Yes.
just this weird, like authority figure at the front of the room
Yes.
for the littler kids. I think
Yeah.
it makes it easier to talk.
Yeah, it
talk
makes
to,
it
so.
softer. The room just seems softer. And you seem like a community too, because they know what's going on with me. I mean, they always ask, obviously, we just had bought a house and they want to know what it looks like, where it is. And I'm like, well, you don't need to know exactly where it is, but we could talk about what it looks like.
Right.
Things like that, but they feel a part of it. And I think that just makes so much of a difference, really. It really does.
No, and it's great that you're so forward thinking in that regard, right? Like, especially like younger grades for education, I think really benefit having that female nurturing presence. And I mean, I'm sure, I don't know the numbers offhand, but I would have to imagine that from K to 5 or pre-K to fourth or fifth grade, it's predominantly female teachers.
Definitely.
Not because of I don't know exactly why, but I would have to imagine it's that.
I think it's
sort of
just,
like the caring
I
thing.
think it is just the caring thing. I do know in college, some of my friends were male teachers in elementary school, and they definitely, they exuded that personality as well. So I think it just really takes a special person on the male end to go into the younger grades, because it is hard. You don't really have that innate, unless, you have kids of your own, things like that. It changes the dynamic, but it really does take a special person.
Well, for me, when I was going through my master's program, I was actively dissuaded from, because I wasn't sure which grade I wanted to teach. I was
Right.
like, I know I want to stay away from middle school. I hated being, 12 to 14. So it's either the older kids or the much younger kids.
Yep.
And I was kind of surprised to see the pushback that I got from within the program, not
Wow.
like from, also friends and family or whatever. And I guess some traditions, are just tough to shake or whatever. Because we've had plenty of male teachers that worked with the kids, just not in a classroom capacity. We talked about
Yes.
Mr. Shu, Mr. Patty,
Yeah.
like
They're the
they're
best.
great,
Oh, yeah.
great at what they do. And so I think it's important to have equal representation just in the building. So it's nice
100%.
to see, see all of
Yeah,
it. But-
and also for younger students, especially boys, some of them may not have those father figures at home, and they really take to those male teachers. So I always think it's awesome when a male teacher decides to go into elementary school, because you never know what life you could impact just by being there. Same on the female end, but there's a lot of us. So, but for them, it's so different. It really is. And I know like a lot of school districts look hard for male teachers, which is a great thing. I really do believe that. But yeah, it is interesting, the dynamic and the breakdown of male, female in school systems.
But I think it's just as important, or maybe more so, for younger boys to have a strong female presence there,
Yeah.
right? Because especially locally, the number of times that people assumed my name was Tim just because my firstborn's son name was Tim, right? Like there's this like sort of, I don't know, like macho, like boys and sports and
Yeah.
like, again, stereotypes that go around.
100%.
I think it's great that, younger boys have access to a different perspective, a different presence and stuff. I think it's,
So it's so true. No, that is, yeah.
and that's just in education, but with sports, which I'll get to that in a second, that's even more important because, we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
so 4 years in, wow, okay, so that's almost a half decade already. How are you feeling at this stage? Obviously more comfortable,
Definitely.
still in love with it as much.
Yes.
How does it work in terms of like the professional development and that kind of stuff? Like, do you have to do additional things for the program?
So the first 4 years we're kind of in like the preliminary stages of our teaching career. So I still have my certification. It's the same thing as everybody else, but we're not tenured yet. So that's the big end all be all almost, is being tenured. And that for me would be, I have to step in the building on the first day of school and I get my tenure. So
In September?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So we were a part of a mentorship program where every year we had to do some kind of project or go to meetings. My first year was a lot of meetings, and we kind of just sat there and honestly talked with each other and just said our struggles, our strengths, things that we wish we knew before we came in, things like that. Second year was a big project. It was a case study. So we had to pick a student, go through some of their struggles, figure out how we can fix that, and go from there. The third year was action research project. And then this year, we actually had to record ourselves teaching throughout the year. So we did one in September, December, March, and then we just had our last one in May, and we kind of had to say, okay, what did we do then that's different now? Because even in that span of time, we've changed as teachers. You just become more comfortable, and your class becomes more comfortable, so the whole dynamic changes a lot. So I think it really helped me. I know sometimes, there's a lot of extra work because teaching is a lot of work in general, but it really helped me, and just to look back on it and be like, wow, I did that. That's pretty good. So
Well, I'm so glad you said that, right? Because and speaking of stigmas, there's no greater stigma, I think, than like teaching being this easy job, especially. So I have a lot of friends, like there was like a lot of white collar kids that I went to school with, or kids from better areas than I was from. So like there was just a lot of like finance folk. And that's my wife is in there now. So,
Right.
I'm well aware of the perception of the lowly teacher, right?
Yes.
Potentially from
Yes.
From the corporate world.
Yes.
And I've said this here, and I'm curious what your take on it is. But to me, like teaching is a almost 24/7 job. For me, like the day doesn't really end at 3:00 or 3:30, whatever it happens to be, and especially the weekends. Like I don't think people appreciate the amount of work that goes into lesson planning. And again, I feel like a dinosaur here. This is a long time ago that I was involved, so maybe now it's just different in terms of the structure. But there's still, I would imagine, some sort of preparation going through, grading, all of those types of things that go into it. And also, I guess on the sadder end of the spectrum, or the more emotionally challenging aspect is, for me, our bad days, like if you're in an office, and you get yelled at because you messed up on a report or whatever, like, yeah, that stinks. And I'm not trying to put that down.
Right.
But the types of things that as teachers and as mandated reporters, and, there are certain things that we are exposed to that it's just harder to shake. And those bad days, or especially that's just one aspect of it. Having a bad day with a student that's just out of control and not listening, where you wind up snapping and yelling at the kids, like those types of things, I had a harder time shaking off than bad days in any other job that I've had. Is that
100%? Yeah, So for me, obviously, I come from a family of nurses and teachers, probably two very underappreciated careers. So the conversations in our family are very different from the outside world. Like you said, the lowly teacher. That's everyone used to say, if you can't do, teach.
Right.
That was the big phrase. But I don't, like you said, think people understand what teaching entails. You wear so many hats throughout the day. You're a nurse, a therapist, counselor, a bunch of things. Sometimes a family counselor where the whole family is going through a tough time, and you're kind of the person that is like you're listening. You're listening to all the things that go on, and you do not shake that. No matter how, my mom tells stories about her time in Jersey City. She had a lot of very sad times, and she still thinks about those kids, and she still thinks about how they are and what they're doing, and there's no way to really contact them, but she wishes she could,
Right.
So yeah, it is mentally and emotionally exhausting for sure, but I don't think, if you're not in it, you'll never understand it really. And that's one of the things that I find solace in, because we do something that's super hard, and I know that, and people close to me know that, and people who are appreciative of teachers. Your whole family was amazing when I had Jackson. You guys were so appreciative of teachers, so it makes the job so much easier. But it's sad to see, because a lot of young students don't want to go into teaching because of the outside world and the perspective on teachers, but there's a lot that goes into it. And even like you said, the weekends, the summers, I start basically planning for the next year midway through July,
Right.
because I want to be ready to go. That's just how I am. Some people don't, but that's fine, just how they manage their classroom and do different things. But it's a lot. Yeah.
And even today, right? You left school and then you had private tutoring, or you were working with other
home
students?
Instruction.
Right, home instruction. So, and then also, which I guess we can jump into that now, is coaching, right? It always seems to be the teachers who do more, I guess, than others. And it's funny, right? Like in certain instances, I feel like we see those kids more than the families do in certain instances. Obviously not all the time, but 35, 40 hours a week, especially if kids are there for aftercare, before care, or whatever.
Yeah.
You get parents that are working a lot. We do have a much more profound influence and impact on those kids, I think, than people appreciate.
Definitely.
So.
Even a story, I always remember this, my first year teaching, I had a student who I noticed was a little bit off, like very sad. And I had reached out and said, hey, I don't know if you noticed what's going on. And the parents didn't, because they worked a lot and they weren't really in tune. I mean, not in a bad way, but it just gets busy. Life is busy. And come to find out, they were very upset about, I forget, friendships or something. But it's interesting how you can just, you know them for such a short amount of time in the grand scheme of things, but you just know them. Like, you know their affect, you know what they're supposed to come in, like, smiley, this, that. And when they don't, you're like, something's weird. But I didn't realize how naturally that would come, especially my first year. But it's true. You just know them. And yeah, it's a great thing. It really is. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely special. And listen, I pride myself on being, open and a good communicator with my kids. And I feel like I know them well. And I'll never forget in 4th grade going to parent teacher conference and Miss Corbel pulling me aside and being like, "Hey, is something going on with Jackson?" I'm like, do you have the right font? Like, Jackson,
right.
Because she said that he seemed upset lately in school, and he didn't seem that way at home. To make a long story short, it turned out that him and his older brother were not getting along very well, and apparently the older one was saying a lot of things to Jackson that were unkind, and it just slipped under the radar here.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have known if she hadn't brought it up, and so we were able to discuss it, figure out what was going on, and resolve it. So it is. It's super important to have that. So yeah, obviously you've got parents are probably the most influential people in a kid's life.
Yes.
And you've got teachers. Then you got coaches.
Yes.
And I'm so excited to talk about sports with you in general because I didn't realize, even when you were teaching Jackson, like just how prolific your athletics background was. And I want to give a special shout out to Jim Ryan because he was the one that told me, he was like, "Dude, look, she is unbelievable." And he filled me in, which was great. So you're coaching now, but I guess it makes sense to kind of start at the beginning in terms of your playing days. So what did you play? Did you play for HYIL coming up through the system? Like what's the background?
So I was a soccer kid, as everyone is, especially here growing up. I was a soccer kid and softball. I ended up my dad was big into soccer and I ended up just letting him know, "I'm sorry, it's just not for me. I don't know what is for me right now, but it's just not for me." So my mom played basketball in high school and they were like, "Well, why don't you just play basketball?" So I tried it, didn't love it, honestly. I didn't really know what was for me. I was very awkward. I was very tall for my age, so very awkward, things like that. And then I kept playing rec, got better. I would practice in my driveway all of the time. My dad was outside all of the time with me. And then it came time to try out for travel, and it was 5th grade was the first time that we could try out for a travel girls team.
Oh, wow.
So I did, and I got cut. And my parents were very worried that would be it for me. But I decided, at 10, I didn't realize what it would do for me then, but I decided just to nonstop practice in the cold, in the rain, all of those things. And I tried out again, and I made it. So I went through the rec system, HYL, I played travel. I had one of the best coaches, shout out Joe Kraus, he's the best. He really took me kind of like under his wing and made sure that I knew that I had potential. And that was the biggest thing that he could do for me, was just say, "Hey, listen, we may not be there right now, but we will be there because you have such potential." And I believed him. So I played travel, and then I got into the AAU circuit, I think when I was in 7th grade. I was on Jersey Fusion first, which kind of introduced me to the AAU world and how overwhelming it was. And then I moved to Central Jersey Hawks, and that's where I stayed until I then went to college.
Where did Fusion play out of?
That's a good question.
Like local? Okay.
Local. Yeah, but those coaches were awesome too. It was the potential thing. I wasn't quite there yet, especially in 7th grade. I was getting kind of like my legs under me of being a scorer, facilitating the basketball, but it was very overwhelming at first. But once I settled in, that was it. Yeah.
That's all. And then you continued. So that's the sort of organized sports side of it. How about on the school side? Was there a middle school team or high school team for you?
Yes. So I played middle school basketball. Luckily, I did get to play. So my 7th grade year, I did play in the regular games. I know it was like the 5th quarter for 7th grade type of thing. But I did play in the regular games. Throughout my basketball coaching or playing life, I've had so many different coaches, and I do think that I know we'll probably touch on this, but girls' sports sometimes are left in the dust. No one really wants to do them. I had 2 different coaches in middle school. I had 3 different coaches in high school. Wow. So the inconsistency, it did take a toll on me as a player for sure. And I think that kind of led into college as well. But Yeah, so then I played on the high school team as well. I started varsity for 4 years, which was fun.
Even as a freshman. Wow.
I did.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So that was a great experience. That right there, my first year playing, I played for Coach Bull, and he was very influential for me. He was tough for sure, but he taught me what an athlete was. We're going to do the hard things, and we're not going to complain about it, and that's the way it was. And he set me up for the rest of my career for sure. So.
And would you say that it also influenced you like off the court too, in terms of like helping you with school, or just changing your work ethic or mentality?
Definitely. I think the thing is, it's so funny, as a teacher, I'm always like, do what you love. I think the arts are amazing. I think that if you love painting and draw, all of those things are so amazing. I just felt, for me, I was not a very confident kid, so I think that organized sports and tough coaches, like, I thrived off of that, and the criticism and all of those things. It didn't really bother me. It more so motivated me. That helped me, I think, just be who I am. That really did. The work ethic, the not taking things too seriously or personally, it really helped me grow into a person.
No, and that's a testament to the coaches that you had, because I've said this more than 1,000 times here, that one of the quotations that stuck with me from grad school was, kids will rise or fall to the level of expectations that you set. And so I take that into my parenting, my teaching, my coaching, all of it. But there's a way to do it. And I'm always of a constructive mindset. I'm always looking to build kids up. And you can be tough. Like you said, I'd like to think that, some of the kids that I've had either play for me or in my classroom would run through a wall for me just because of this, because they want to, because I've earned their respect. I didn't, it wasn't through yelling at them or putting them down or, again, it's in my mind, it's all about building kids up. And part of the way to do that is to set the bar high, to have those expectations.
For sure. It's interesting, and again, we're back to the female part of it. A lot of, I noticed that depending on which coach I had, they all approached coaching girls differently. There were some that just coached us, and you could tell they didn't care who you were, what you looked like. It didn't matter. They were coaching you no matter what, and they wanted you to be your best. And some kind of would tread lightly. And I could tell the difference, and not that those coaches weren't good, because a lot of them taught me a lot of technical things, but I personally just loved the coaches who just coached, and they told you what was wrong, and they did it in a nice way, but they were there to also pick you back up. And I think that's one of my most favorite coaches ever is Doug Shaw. He was my AU coach for 4 years. He was notorious for, he knocked you down a few pegs, but then he built you right back up. It was never where you were left wondering how good you were, if you were worth it, any of that. Those questions never came through my mind. It was more so like, okay, you know what? He's right. I'm not shooting the ball well, and maybe I should pass a few times. So he changed my game forever, and he just instilled in me that work ethic like Coach Bull did. It just built from there for sure.
No, that's great. And you mentioned sort of like the disparity, right, between like the men's game and the women's game. That's another topic I wanted to sort of dive into. I don't know how much you remember from like the AAU days or, even high school or whatever. I feel like progress has been very slow coming in that regard. It's happening, right? Like, I don't know if you watch any of the, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we've gotten big into like the WNBA.
Yeah.
And not just because of Sarah. Funny enough, Jackson was more likely to put on, the Liberty game. Like, he knew the schedule or whatever.
I love that.
And part of why, and listen, I remember going to Liberty games in 2002 or 3 where there were maybe 500 people there, and I mean, it got so bad that they were playing in Westchester in like these tiny places.
Yeah.
And the excuse everybody made was, well, it's the ad revenue. They're not bringing in the money and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And that killed me, because those same people were the ones that were, bad-mouthing the basketball. Well, it's not exciting. There's no dunking. They're fundamentally sound. Like, I'm sure you've heard it all.
Yeah.
And I can't tell exactly when it clicked, but I feel like now, I mean, it's the same game. It's the same talent level. It's not like all of a sudden the WNBA just got great players for the first time.
Yep.
They're just, in my opinion, finally given their due and their shot to actually show the world what they're doing.
Yeah.
So as a kid coming up, did you ever hit a point, or did you have any experiences where you felt overlooked or treated differently, not just from the coaching that you mentioned, but like maybe, in a program or just as in general?
Yeah. So I will say, as I went through Raritan. There were times, obviously, where I think just in general the boys' sports were more not, I wouldn't say important, but that's what it felt like sometimes as a female athlete. We're just looked at more, cared about more. Obviously, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl, I was like, well, why doesn't anyone care about the girls' basketball team? Or what about the girls' volleyball team who's brand new and now we're winning all these games, you know? So there were times I definitely thought that, and I will say our athletic director, Mr. DiGenito, he was great. He really did. He cared so much about every single athlete, no matter what. And he tried his best. But I think it was just the system and the way that it was set up where you weren't on the forefront. Even volleyball, that's the one thing I always talk about. Basketball was always a big sport. Everyone knew basketball. So you were looking at the boys' scores, and then you were looking at the girls' scores after that. But for volleyball, no one cared. And it felt that way. Like, you could feel it all the time. No one cared. Up until I think my second year of coaching, no one even really reported on volleyball. It was a lot of the coaches just in the area really just like came together and said, hey, let's just get these girls out there, because there are good volleyball players in New Jersey. Obviously, you think right away like California, those states that, oh, it's big volleyball, because it is. But there are great volleyball players here in New Jersey, and volleyball was so just, we were like, over in the corner. So up until probably 2 years ago, really, they started reporting and actually giving these girls this spotlight, which is so important. When I played, no one knew. Our coach, Coach Cariwana, used to joke around and say that people thought we were the chess team. That's how it felt. No one knew. No one would be there. No one would show up. Now we have student sections because our team is very good as well. But yeah, it was... As a player, I felt it sometimes for sure. Not outwardly. There was never someone would be like, oh, girl sports is this, or... but you felt it. It was always there.
Yeah, and it could just be a vibe in general too, right? Like, I've noticed this. I'm not a baseball guy at all, and I would say that Hazlitt is very much a baseball town, and I would make that argument based solely on the reactions, you know, from HYAL to the different championship experiences or whatever. If baseball, if a baseball team goes far and does well, there's fire engines and parades and stuff, but pretty much any other sport, even soccer, you know, it's not that it's crickets, but it's just, it's different. And in that instance, it doesn't necessarily have to fall on male, female lines, but I can understand that, you know, sort of being the case for Raritan too. And for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure the first high school volleyball game I attended was when Jackson and I came, when you were coaching. I don't know, it wasn't your first game, but it was that season. I think you were playing, was it SJ? I think it was SJV. And I was like, it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun. Also, you mentioned California with volleyball, right? Unfortunately, I think when most people think of women's volleyball, they think of two, you know, skimpy, uniformed girls on the beach, like, which that's a whole separate topic. Yes. And so the team aspect of the volleyball that Raritan has, and also flag football, which I'm so stoked for.
I know.
I'm hoping it's going to be a varsity sport. I don't know if it is yet or not.
It's not yet. I don't think a lot of teams I think there's not enough to create a full schedule, or else it would be. I also know, obviously, budget constraints, those kinds of things play a big factor in it.
Because it was in the news maybe 2 or 3 months ago about this push to try to get it nationalized for it. So, but yeah, that's one thing that I think is good, is that there's still a disparity, unfortunately, in terms of the way sports are viewed, whether it's male or female. And I don't even like to say like female basketball. Like, to me, especially basketball is sort of the background that I come from. So if you're a hooper, you're a hooper. It doesn't matter, you know. Like, I remember I had a friend, Marianne, who played, I think she wound up playing for the University of Maine or some New England school. And man, like, she was a pretty girl. And these idiot guys would come up, and all they saw was her appearance. And I would just chuckle, because I'm like, dude, you're about to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And, you know, she would box them out. I mean, she caught me off guard one time, and I buckled me, you know? And so I learned, like, oh, no, basketball is its own language. It's its own thing. And if you can play, you can play. You get respect that way.
Definitely.
But it can be tough when the support system maybe isn't in place, right? And that I'll go into the coaching side of it in a second, but the one thing that I still see consistently that drives me absolutely crazy is this inconsistency in refereeing games. These guys, and it's always, I'm not going to call out anybody in particular, even though there are a few who are for, you know, specifics, but it's just these old white guys that, you know, they treat a 7th grade game as if they're 7-year-old girls playing for the first time. like girls are running with the basketball. They're not whistling it dead. Like, and it's like, dude, if this was a boys' 7th grade game, I know you would not be refereeing it this way, because my son's 5th grade game just finished, and you know, were on top of them for double dribbles and, you know, like these crazy infractions. So that tells me there's still a long way to go.
There is.
But at least there's some progress. And on the coaching front, so Sarah is so lucky. We love Sarah Dessner. Sarah Dessner started an all-girls AAU program, the Shore Aces.
Oh, wow.
And she started it a few years ago. I don't think Sarah was among the first group, but she was among the first few, let's say. And what's so great about Des is she has like the same kind of like drive that you do, the same care and stuff. And her vision is just constantly like, she looks beyond the basketball court. So she's an entrepreneur. She's an assistant coach. She was the D2 coach that I had mentioned.
Oh, awesome.
And so she's just a leader. I don't even want to say a leader of women. She's a leader of people.
Right.
But she's such a beacon for young women specifically, because she walks the walk. Unfortunately, she's a Knicks fan, and I'm so nervous that this is going to be the year for them. But you're a Knicks fan too, right? Big time. So at least I have a small pocket of people that if it happens, I can be happy for them.
Yes.
Because otherwise, But she is just she's just such a great example. And it's wild because, you know, Sarah's played with her for, I don't know, 12 seasons now, maybe. It's been this is her forever home for AAU.
That's awesome.
Each of my kids, we wound up doing 2 teams, which is its own. I don't know if that was prevalent when you were playing through AAU. For us, it sort of became a necessity. There are people that take it way too far, where their kids are overextended and it's too much. For us, it really came down to 2 things logistically. One, we put all of our eggs in this particular basket for Tim, for my oldest son, and like 2 weeks after all of the winter tryouts were done, they closed up shop. And they decided they weren't going to have a season. So he got screwed out of, you know, an entire season. And I said, never again. Like, I'd rather be able to be involved with 2 programs. This way, if one folds, you know, we're still there. And I think it's important for kids to get different looks. Because you can, as much as I love Des, and she's a great coach for Sarah, I don't want Sarah getting too comfortable and thinking like, oh, well, I'm, you know, an important player on. No, I want you in these other programs where you're just starting out, where you have to fight your way back to the top. And so that's, you know, an important thing to me. Anyway, this experience of being involved in these different programs, I've seen a lot of great female coaches, and I've seen, you know, unfortunately, like up close, the way they're spoken to by the refs, the way they're, you know, interacted with when they're going up against a male coach. And thankfully, all of the coaches that we've had are fiery women that are not going to stand there and take it. But it's eye-opening and very disheartening to see that kind of stuff still happens. As a coach yourself, have you encountered that at the high school level at all?
Yes.
Oh.
Like countless times. And I was lucky enough to coach. So our coaching staff for the high school, when I first got hired and was asked to coach, it was a new head coach, Nick Mahoney, who's awesome. And then Ashley Waukee.
Mr. Mahoney, did he teach at the middle school? Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then Ashley Waukee, and both her and I, obviously female coaches. So it's awesome. Like, we were both there kind of for each other. So it's funny. I didn't see it as clearly up until this year. And this year it was myself and then 2 male coaches. So it was different. And it's so funny. And I would go home and tell my parents this all the time. The referees would come up and they shake your hand before the game. And they say, who's the head coach? And I coached JV, and our other male coach would coach with me. And every single time they would say, are you the head coach? To him. Right. It was like, never would it be me being the head coach. And then I would say, no, it's me. Thanks. Nice to meet you. So it just is, it's so interesting and even they were like, wow, it's every time. Without fail, it was every single, even for female refs, it was every single time. It was always the male head coach.
That's interesting.
And did it hurt my feelings? No, because it didn't matter. I mean, we were going to do, but yeah, it was always. And the other thing that I noticed too with, especially male refs, they're very quick to tell us to calm down. It happens all the time. Male coaches can scream and yell, they're red in the face, and it's nothing. And then we say 1 or 2 things, even if it's just nicely, it's immediately calmed down, or you get a warning or things like that. And yeah, it's disheartening because, and then the girls look at you and they want to see how you react. And for me, I know, and which sometimes I shouldn't, but there's no way. Why are you not telling him to calm down? You know, it really is. It's jarring at times. You don't really see it or feel it until that moment. You're like, wait a minute, he's been screaming the whole time, you know? It's yeah.
To me, that's one of the most egregious double standards because that transcends sports. It's just societal.
Yep.
It's in every job, right? Mm-hmm. A man, you know, who's screaming and going crazy, whatever. The adjectives used to describe him, he's fiery, he's passionate,
powerful.
Right?
Yeah,
Powerful.
yeah.
And you see it in players too, specifically these guys. And half the time, like Draymond's a great example. Draymond Green, right? Like
Yes.
Draymond, to me, there's a level of immaturity that goes into it.
Yep.
And there are other words that I would use to describe it that are more along that line than, you know, powerful and whatever. But without fail, a female player or coach doing the same thing, she's emotional, she's histrionic, she's out of control, she's this or that. And it's crazy to me because it's the same behavior, it's the same reaction. And, you know, again, there are people who do it who are fiery and passionate and who, you know, direct it in a constructive fashion, and that's great. And on both sides of the gender table, there are people who are just immature and lose their cool, and you know, I don't know, like it shouldn't have that factor. But and again, going back to the Shore Aces program, the number of times that I've been, you know, talking to Des before a game, and the refs come over and come to me and say, "Oh, are you the coach?" And I'm like, "Dude, seriously?
Yeah.
No, not at all."
It's crazy. It really is. And that's the biggest thing. Like, I love hearing about that because I think that girls in sports, they just need a role model too. They need someone to look at and be like, okay. And there's been times where I would like to say a lot more than what I said, but in a way too, you don't want to feed into that narrative. You want to stand your ground and be firm because no one should be able to talk to you or disregard you in that fashion. But also you want to put your best foot forward and be like, no, it's me. And now we're going to play and continue on. And yes, I yelled at you and I apologize, but that was a bad call. Like, I'm not going to back down just because you think I should. There's no way. And the girls they look to you and they see how you react. I remember my first year coaching freshman volleyball, there happened to be a male scorekeeper doing the clock. And a couple of times I would look up and I just know it felt like the score was off. And I usually don't like to question because normally I actually feel bad for them. Usually it's another teacher after school who's doing something for their program. But it was a notorious thing that they would at that school change the score sometimes. And freshman volleyball people are like, who cares? I care because the girls care.
Oh, yeah.
It's just one of those things for all freshman sports. People are like, who cares? But it's important. That's how you learn. But anyway, so I had said one time and said, hey, I'm pretty sure, now I can check my book, I'm not trying to be rude, I'm pretty sure you missed a point or whatever it might have been. And immediately it was just, why are you being so emotional? It's freshman volleyball, who cares? And I'm like, hold on. I approached very kindly, and we do care because my girls care, their parents who travel to the game care, and I care. Right. These are my girls. Like, I'm not going to just let them be like, oh, sorry for bothering you. No, I am going to bother you now. So every single time I would look at the clock, look down, and he fixed the initial problem. That wasn't a problem. But I would check, and then after the game, he actually said to me and said, I'm going to be honest with you. I think it was extremely disrespectful how you kept checking on me every time I changed a point. And I said, I'll be honest with you. I think it's extremely disrespectful the way that you're talking to me and the fact that you weren't listening to me. I was being very kind. And this conversation is disrespectful. Yeah. And that was that. And on the bus, we got on the bus and the girls were like, Coach, that was awesome. I'm like, thanks. I didn't try to be awesome. I actually was mad. But they look to you. They really do. They look to you. Dude,
that's such an awesome story. And I'm so glad that you stood up to him in that regard. Because it is. It's just this... it's like the default like white guy confidence kind of thing, right? That like it just I don't know. And my wife and I have had this discussion a number of times, right? So in the corporate world at least, and maybe I mean maybe you can attest to this too, either as a teacher or in sports too, right? Like I feel like men and women approach, and again, this is I try not to paint with super broad strokes, right? But in certain instances, right? If there's an interview, a lot of times a male candidate goes in, there's no second thoughts about worthiness or whatever. He goes in there expecting to get the job. And, you know, and sometimes that can affect the process. Whereas women, they may second guess themselves, their qualifications. Am I worthy of this? You know, there's a lot more, and women tend to be more cerebral and thoughtful anyway. So I'm sure that's, you know, a contributor to it. But I feel like it's sort of like the same thing with sports too. And it's a shame, like, because, the double standards just make unnecessary situations.
Definitely.
And just to touch on like the freshman thing too, I'm glad that you stuck up for them, right? So we've had 3 middle school seasons so far. So my older son made the team as a 7th grader and as an 8th grader. The expectations that I had were, I was hoping he would make it both times. But the expectations for the 8th grade season were a little higher. And he wasn't ready for that. I could do a whole episode on that experience of having to take a step back and learn to support him and, and do all that.
Yes.
But the point was that, he basically played in only the 5th quarters. He got in sporadically here or there, some garbage time minutes.
Right.
But as an 8th grader, like, that was tough for me as a dad, knowing what he was capable of and whatnot. But the point was that I would sit through, because in travel they do the 5th quarter as like the 0 quarter. It comes before the game, but for middle school it's afterwards. So I would sit there through the entire game, and when I tell you the level of disrespect that some people had for the 5th quarter in general and 5th quarter players, the game ends. The game ends.
Right.
These people are standing up right in front of the court, having conversations, and I'm trying to look for my kid. And so that experience with Tim really shaped me for this past year when Sarah came in, and she, again, it's frustrating because the talent pool isn't the same for the middle school ages, and we can touch on that. That was another thing I wanted to talk about, was bridging the gap between travel and all that stuff.
Yes.
But Sarah came in with another 7th grader, and they helped the 8th graders that were there. They had a great season. Sarah played in all the games. She had the opposite experience that Tim did. If they could have had all-stars for 7th graders, she probably would have at least been in contention for it. And so I made it a point, even though, she's played the full game, whatever, I stuck around for the 5th quarters because I remembered what it was like for people to be dismissive of it.
Yeah.
So that was my long way back to thanking you for sticking up for the freshman sports, because it matters to somebody. Somebody is there. That's their kid's time to shine, whether it's the 5th quarter of the freshman games or whatever. Yeah. And so thanks for sticking up for, sort of the voiceless ones there.
Yeah, and it's so true what you said about how it matters to somebody. It's also a stepping stone, and I think that in order to succeed, especially volleyball, I mean, these kids come in with no prior experience. That's just how it is. In a lot of programs, we're all pretty new, especially in like Monmouth County. It became a very new sport quickly. So they come in and they're nervous in general. They have no idea what's going on. That's why I like it, because it's such a teacher time. I really am teaching. That's it. And they know when it doesn't matter, and then they start to fool around because it's almost an embarrassment factor. And I've seen that even when I was in middle school in the 5th quarter, they would joke around, chuck from half court. Everyone thinks it's funny because, why does this game matter? But it does, because that's when you're learning the good habits. That's when you're learning those skills and the necessary things that you need for the next level. Every kid wants to start on varsity. That's obviously the big grand goal, but some it takes a little bit longer. We won the state championship for volleyball this past year. One of the girls is on my freshman team, and she played JV up until last year. Without her, we wouldn't even touched where we got in playoffs, because she took the time and she stuck with it, and then she was an absolute difference maker this past season.
Wow.
Without her, we would not even have gotten where we were. So it really does matter. That's what you think about, the bigger picture. They can't see that as the kids, which is why you got to stand up for them and say, hey, this is important. I like being here. Do you like being here? Let's all be here together. So, yeah.
Right. And I mean, it would be disingenuous not to say that there is a difference between, the 5th quarter and the other 4, or a freshman team versus JV or varsity. But again, my son's a great example of this. So he had Coach Rosner for 7th grade for the middle school, and Coach Rosner was super supportive of Tim, loved him, thought he was great, had potential. Then he moved to the high school, right? So then Coach Kaplan came in as his 8th grade coach, and that experience was great. Adam Kaplan was such a great pickup for the middle school, because he is somebody that sees the bigger picture too. And I'll never forget this past season, I was there for Sarah's game at Cedar Drive. I always do that. Cedar Grove is further north. Cedar Drive is over here. And what happened was the game proper ended, right? So the boys' game finished. And I mean, it was it may have gone to overtime. It was really, really, really close. And I think we lost by a bucket or 2. It was, again, super tight, very contentious. Yeah. Then the 5th quarter starts. And there was a kid that had a very obvious set of physical disabilities. And I don't know, whatever the conversation was that happened, Coach Kaplan basically, like, this kid got his moment to shine. When I tell you, like, it was like a Hallmark movie. Like, the gym went absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And the kids, pretty much maybe up to the final, like 2 or 3 games, like any of those fifth quarters, there was none of the chucking. He treated it like it was
a game.
like the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Okay. And to the extent of, there were a couple times where somebody was forgetting to put the score up and he's shouting at them. There's 46 seconds left.
Of course.
In the fifth quarter. And he's saying, hey, we got a bucket. Please put it up.
Right.
And I loved that because of what it represented. He wasn't being difficult. He wasn't, busting the guy's chops. It mattered to him because it mattered to that kid that scored, that kind of thing. And so again, you mentioned the stepping stone part of it. So Tim is a freshman at Raritan now. Mm-hmm. He got to play, not for Coach Rosner directly, but he played on the freshman team.
Yeah.
His first game, he put up 15.
That's awesome.
He scored once in 2 full seasons at the middle school. Not that scoring is the be all and end all,
right.
but Coach Rosner believed in him, gave him these opportunities, and so we'll see what happens. Tim can't wait to try out for JV.
That's awesome.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to, I don't know if you were cool with discussing this. I was curious what your thoughts were in terms of building a pipeline, right? Because so from my recollection, there were certain coaches who would come in at whatever the youngest age was for the travel program for Hazlitt, and they would take a group of girls or boys and go with them through. So Pat Drennan is the last one that I remember. I just know there's a girl named Angela that played for him.
Yes.
Who, when you said you were out in the rain and the snow, that's her too. She's at Middle Road all the time. Which is funny because I'm coming back with my kids from playing in the snow and I'm like, oh, look, there's somebody else as crazy as us.
Yes.
And so, but there were spurts. So Pat had his team, but then there was a gap of maybe 2 or 3 years. And Sarah's with Coach Katie Bono. We've had our own little cohort that goes through. And it's frustrating because people don't realize the sort of ripple effect of that, of not having volunteers step up, of not getting enough girls to come to try out, to come to play. And the impact, really, you start to see it at the middle school level. And I can only imagine at the high school level where there are just these horrific talent gaps, to put it kindly.
No, it's so true. This is one of the most frustrating things. And I talk anyone's ear off who's willing to listen about this, because it is, and it's not the girl's fault. It's the way the system is, and it's unfortunate because they come in, like you had said, you mentioned Angela, she's graduating this year, she's a senior. She was great. She really was, and she was a part of one of those groups that went together. And you can just see it, and you see how prepared she is. She can play in a game. Obviously in the high school level, we have to teach them a lot of things especially about mentality. That's one of the biggest things we see when they come in. It's interesting. They crumble fast, because if you think about it, sometimes you have freshmen who are playing against 18-year-old girls,
right?
Women technically, and it's hard, and they're big and they're strong, and you get knocked around, and it's scary. Even from my own experience, I remember I was telling my mom, I'm playing women, and she's like, I know, and it's hard, but you're gonna be okay. So it really is. But then, and I always say this, and then all of a sudden we get these kids, especially, they come through and there was no cohesive unit. Nobody stepped up to coach them. And the gap it's serious. And to the point almost where we look at each other and say, if we put her in, she's going to get hurt. It's almost, in a very dramatic sense, it's a safety concern, because these kids, they're playing and you're playing. This is from this past year for our JV team. We don't have a freshman team, again, because of numbers, and which is sad in itself. So we had all these freshmen, all of them freshmen, playing JV. So now you're playing kids from these other schools, SJV, RBC, and those kids are vying for a varsity spot, and they're putting on a show, as they should, because that's what they want. They want to play on varsity. So our girls are out there and they are so discouraged. Just looking at them is heartbreaking. It really is, and it's not their fault. It's because of the lack of coaching, the lack of knowledge that they were introduced to of the game, because some people just do it because it's a stipend position, or they think they know, and that's not to be like rude or anything, but they think they know and they think they can do this job, but it's a disservice. It really is, and it's sad, and a lot of them step away. We have so many number issues because they're like, I'm not playing these teams who beat us by 40, because why should I? It's just something that I want to do for fun. And that is one of the biggest things. It's just for fun, you know? And of course it's fun, but also it's about other things, such as learning great values, winning together, losing together, and still understanding it's okay. A lot of them just give up. And again, I really do think it's because they didn't have that group or the coaching that they needed to be successful.
I think the coaching is probably the biggest part of it, because so much, you said, like, it's like another teaching job, right? Like, so much education comes into it, and especially basketball. Like, I know baseball gets all the love as being like the most difficult thing to do, right? To hit a baseball, right? And then, you know, hockey to me seems like the most difficult just because you have to be able to skate. I can't skate for anything. I have the horrible balance. But to me, basketball is sort of like at the middle of that Venn diagram because it's way more physical, you know, than than baseball is, and it requires a lot of technical ability and everything. It's frustrating, right? It drives me nuts because there's so much room for improvement the way things are run, and it kills me to see how things are run like next door, right? So we've had a lot of interaction with Homedale, and so Homedale's rec program, travel program, it is just this pipeline that runs all the way through, and it's not even just basketball. It seems like it's most sports. And it's frustrating. Like, I will not be critical of anybody at HYL because, again, they're all volunteer. Like, these people are volunteering. Yeah. They're doing the best that they can.
Yep.
But when I filled in, and again, you know, Jim Ryan and Dave Sordos have given up a lot of their time over decades to make sure that these kids had a chance to play and to do all of that. And so I had filled in when Jim stepped down. I wanted to be the gap guy, right? To just get them to the next person. So I got to see all sides of it, dealing with parents, other coaches, you name it. And the only thing that frustrated me in an area that I thought was important was marketing. Like, I don't think enough people know or are aware of what's available, you know?
Yes.
And one of the first changes that I made when I took over rec was I saw rec as a pipeline to travel, right? So rec should be for fun. Period.
Of course.
I think it's at any sport, that's the introduction to it.
Yeah.
And you have kids, and that's the thing. Like, for me, coaching wise, like, I loved having rec because there was a certain challenge to it. I have these two kids that very clearly want to be they want to be professional basketball players.
Right.
But I have these 6 who, you know, are there because their parents are making them be there, or this is their first taste of sports. So how do I treat them all equally? It's the teaching conundrum. You know, like, you have the super smart kids, and then the kids that are struggling. You still have to give them, you know, each their due. But anyway, so one of the things that I did right away was I established a 5 and 6 year old group, right? Because it was only like 7, 8, 9, whatever it was. And we made it co-ed, and it was just, hey, let's get these kids in. I think we had some kids that were at like Sycamore maybe, you know, and like, you lower the rims, you just give them this introductory taste of it, and then hopefully that can progress them to higher levels. And unfortunately, travel's almost become like Rec Plus, basically, because the numbers are so low that it really isn't as competitive as it used to be. You know, like you said, you got cut from a team. There are very few kids that are getting cut purely just based on numbers.
100%.
You know?
We don't cut at the high school level.
Right.
And that's saying something.
Right.
That's saying something.
Right. And it's again, it's no fault. You can't put it on any one person.
No,
it's certainly not the kid's fault. It's not, you know, it's not anyone's. But what I would like to see, and this is as a parent, as a coach, as, you know, all the different hats that I could throw on at once, these kids need to get out of the bubbles that form here. So again, I don't know if this was prevalent when you were up and coming, but what I've seen happen here is kids start as a cohort for rec. So you have some parent that steps up, they say, all right, I'm going to coach. Then they have this group. And then they take that one group of kids and that becomes, you know, a soccer team. That becomes this team or that team. And then when it gets to the travel level, they want that to be the travel team, but that's not how it works. There have to be tryouts and things. Right. And I mean, at least a half dozen that I can think of off the top of my head that balked and said, well, then we're going to pull these kids out. And that's what they did. They went to Central Jersey. They went to Monroe. They went to these places where they make their own team. Right. They get slapped with an AAU label to make it seem like, you know, they're in this big time thing. But they're playing sometimes kids 2 years younger.
Yes.
And there's you know, in that environment, there's no learning, there's no development or whatever. No. So the first primary thing I would advocate for, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, you get your kids in a challenging environment. Get them to be in a position where they need to learn and be challenged, because clearly that worked for you, right? Like, no, it sucks that you had to have that negative experience to prompt it, but the fact that you did it is what propelled you, I think, forward.
Yeah, you have to be uncomfortable, because if you're comfortable, there's no growth ever. Not in any sense. Even for AAU, so back to that journey, I was on Jersey Fusion. It was a very new team, so we were kind of just figuring things out. And at the time, I played for in the summer-ish. So when I wasn't playing with Jersey Fusion, I was playing at St. Mary's, and it was a summer league. And not to shoot my own horn, honestly, but I was just way better than the kids on that team. But I liked
the outdoor league on the blue courts.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I liked it, and I would say I liked going. I liked playing outside. It was fun. And actually, SAV coach Dawn Carpel, I played with her daughter on the St. Mary's League, and she came up to my dad and said, "You got to get her out, because if she stays in something like this, or even an AU program where she's the best kid on the team, she won't be the best when it comes time to be the best, So my dad was like, okay, let's go somewhere else. So I ended up going to another AU team. I actually was on another AU team before I went to Central Jersey Hawks. It was the Rebels, and I was there with them just for 1 year. And again, same thing like you said, it was a lot of girls that knew each other, and then all of a sudden it was like, who's leaving? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? So that wasn't the place for me, because now it's just chaos. And then I had to try out. It was a very grueling process to try out. I was so nervous all the time. There were so many girls there. But, I mean, my dad always just used to say, listen, you're putting your best foot forward, and whatever happens, happens. If you're not ready, then we know what we have to do to get you there if you really want to play for them. Luckily, I made it, obviously, but I was uncomfortable, and that's where I saw the most growth, was when I was uncomfortable. And like you said, when they travel in these pockets and then they put them, they're either playing kids that are way younger, and of course they're going to win by 40. Everybody would, right? You want to play the kids that are 2 years older than you instead, So, yeah, the positions that they're in aren't great either, and I think that a lot of it is just broken. I think that the way that kids are growing up and playing sports, a lot of it is broken. And one of my biggest pet peeves, too, is, the not trying other things, too. I know that, my sister played field hockey. None of us knew what field hockey was at all. My parents would go to the games and just be like, yay, because you didn't really know. But she loved it, and she was very good at it. Never tried it before. Was like, I'm just going to pick up this and go from there. But she grew a lot as a person throughout that time, because you were trying something new. You had no idea. So I think, just like you said, trying new teams, new coaches, different coaching styles. You don't want to get stuck.
So you just tacitly hit on the key point for me, and that is that I think modern parents are petrified of failure, the perception of failure. They are trying to shield their children from it across the board, not just in sports, just in general, versus equipping them with coping mechanisms for it. And the problem is, and you see it playing out in sports, especially when a kid tries out for the first real time in high school or middle school.
Yes.
And they don't make it. They're crushed. They have no background to fall back onto, because they've never had that experience before. And, again, too, it's also, I've complained about this ad nauseum here, that people are big on the superficial stuff, the quick fix, the appearance of, being on a travel team or an AAU team or this or that. Yeah. To me, what matters is the substance. I'd much rather, put the effort and the time and the work into it. So Sarah's a perfect example of this. So when I was coaching Tim's teams, I would always take the last slot at Sycamore, because the janitor there was a cool dude.
Right.
We cleaned up after ourselves. Yeah. So we would be there till 10 or 11 o'clock.
Right.
And I would teach Sarah. We would go over stuff, because she would want to do what Tim was doing. And so when it came time for her first, and we did skills training, and the skills trainer was the one that was like, maybe you should try to get her into AAU.
Yeah.
And so after 2 seasons of rec, we decided to explore it. So I went into that. It was one of those things where the team was already formed, and she said, hey, we're having a practice tonight. Just bring her down.
Right.
So not? I thought, okay, this is going to be a good gauge for me. I'm going to see how much more work she needs to do. Hopefully, best case scenario, this coach can say, hey, she needs to do these 5 things, and we're going to get on that.
Yeah.
Sarah walked in there and blew the top off of that practice and got added to the team on the spot, which I was, again, not expecting.
Right.
And that was, again, I don't like to oversell my kids. I don't like to think they're the best. I'm critical to the opposite extent, because it's not a benefit to them.
No.
And you mentioned Dawn. So as much as, so the Aces are our forever home for Sarah, but Nick Catania with Jersey Pride, and then Don Carpel and Coach Jen for JSE, those were really influential experiences, Sarah playing for them, because she had gotten comfortable with the Aces, and again, like, she was on an A-level team, because I mean, it's not an official thing, but the A team, B team, and all that. And I kind of just felt like she started coasting, and so she tried out for and made Catania's A team for the Jersey Pride, but I mean, these girls were like high level athletes, and so it was a great experience because Sarah was like, oh, crap, like I need to figure
better.
out, and she went from being a starter and playing 90% of the minutes to coming off the bench and being lucky to squeeze out 5, but that 5 became 10, that 10 became a half, and eventually a starting position, and it just so worked out that Pride took some time off. And so we switched over to JSE, and she had the same experience. Again, she came in at the bottom, which is so funny because Dawn and Jen didn't even know that she was a point guard because they had 2 or 3 on the roster already. So the need wasn't there. So it's so important for, and listen, I was terrified in both of those instances of her not making the team, and I knew that she wasn't going to be a starter. I didn't want her to be a starter. It's like the joke, right? Like, I never want to be a part of any club that would have me as its member kind of thing. Like, I wouldn't want her to be on a team where she's automatically a starter and all this, because where is her growth, her development? So I loved the fact that she had to fight for it. And I wish more people, were comfortable with that, because I think it would help with their kids' development. And they would seek out something a little more difficult, because the AAU circuit has expanded so much for girls. There's so much access to it. Did you ever do any tournaments, if you remember, like, in Atlantic City or around?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
We went to a lot. I mean, the one big one for us was Spooky Nook, and then everyone loves Spooky Nook. Everyone's been there a billion times. We loved that place. But we went to a bunch. AC was one. We went out to Scranton was another one. Long Island. We went far away, so we went to Chicago, Kentucky, those places.
Oh, wow.
Too, for showcases. But
so the problem with those showcase tournaments locally, and again, like the teams, people forget this. There's levels to it, and so our teams are good, but there are teams out there that, like, that's all they do is those tournaments, or I respect those those kids, but those are kids that might be playing 25 hours a week for that one team. And hey, more power to you. It is what it is. But yes, Spooky Nook. Sarah was hitting me up yesterday. So we're like a big craft beer family. So we go to breweries all over. And I guess there's one nearby. And my wife took her, and they had a pool table and some great like sandwich or pretzel things. So Sarah's like, man, I really hope we get another Spooky Nook tournament soon to go there.
I'm sure she will, because I spent a lot of my summers there. So
absolutely. And so I just feel like there is sort of an onus on the parents here, like, to seek out other things, right? Like, rec is great and travel is great too. And I think, Hazlitt has a nice program. It's definitely like a good stepping stone to get to AAU and to get to that. But like, people need to commit to that and think long term if they want their kids to be competitive at the 7th and 8th grade level. And then especially for high school, you can't start at that point and then expect to succeed.
Right. Yeah. My dad basically, I remember we had this conversation a bunch of times. He would just say, if you're in, we're in. Like, you got to be in, because it's a lot of time, and you have to understand it is like a job. Obviously, I was a young kid, but it was like a job because you had to commit to it and you had to be in. If you weren't, I played with so many different players from that went on to play D1 to D3 to not at all. They did their AAU career and we were like, I'm done. And those were the people that were halfway in, halfway out. Did they care? Not really. Were they there for the social aspect? Fine. And it did show. And they were great teammates, let me tell you, but it was different for them. And that's okay. However everyone wants to experience it. But that's the thing. As a parent too, and I see it in the high school level, you can't expect them to be the best if you don't practice like you're the best. You don't push yourself to those limits, because where is that growth coming from? Nowhere. There's nowhere. And yeah, it's tough. And I do think that just the culture a lot of the time. And I remember, I thought of this while you're talking about this. When I was going to high school, my parents, we really had this conversation, do you want to go to Raritan and play? Because our program was not great. And we thought about it. We really did. We thought about other options, SJV, RBC. We looked into different things. And I said, yeah, I want to go to Raritan. You know, I do want to go. And I was going to start for 4 years, and that was a big thing for me. And a lot of people were like, well, there was no challenge there. You weren't competing for a spot, which granted, they were right. But there was another challenge for me in another way where I had to figure out how to mentally deal with losing, how to be a 13-year-old leader, how to adjust and adapt to these not great scenarios. So I think challenge also comes in so many different ways. But like you said, parents are so afraid to put them in that spot because the coping skills are just not there, and kids would be crushed forever. And it's sad. But there were times I remember I would go home from games and cry because people would be making fun of us in the crowd because we weren't that great, things like that. But again, like I said, those years really built me up to play AAU in those tough spots. So it does matter.
Right. But especially now, it's all about the gram, right? Like it's, the participation trophy that we can flash, the banner, the AAU champion banner for that tournament or whatever. No, it makes me laugh because like, that's not what matters. Like I'm lucky that Sarah and Jackson, who are the two of the three kids that really seem all in on playing at the collegiate level, and who knows beyond that. It's not surprising then that both of them play up at least a year, if not 2 years. Jackson, was just helping Jim's Coach Ryan's, I guess, 11U team. Wow. So some of those kids are 12.
Yeah.
He was 9.
Right.
And you want to talk different challenges or whatever, like that was difficult to navigate just in terms of like the internal workings, right? Because like now this 9-year-old kid is coming in and you have your 12-year-old son who's not playing as much because he's there. But again, and I mistakenly thought that, well, it's basketball, like what we said earlier, right? Like, well, it's basketball. Like, Jackson's going to cook, and he'll earn that respect.
Right.
That made it worse because then it was like rubbing it in that, like, this kid is here. But we had the point that I was getting at was, like, I just filled in and coached Sarah's 7th grade AAU team the other day, and it was against a high school team. It said high school, it said 9, but there were definitely some sophomores there. Apparently this team was like winless or whatever, or had one win, whatever it was. We wound up losing. And it was so frustrating for me because it was at a place. So it's weird. It's the one place where like the rules seem to be different. Like they weren't keeping track of the fouls. So like they were offering up free throws for shooting fouls. Okay. But other fouls, it was just whistle it side out. So I guess and I don't want to call it like a home field advantage, but I've seen this happen at this place with other games before. And these girls obviously knew this. So Sarah got hip checked out of bounds a couple times or whatever. But I loved that aspect because they were coming to me in a timeout complaining about it. I'm like, figure it out. Like, that complaining about it isn't going to change anything. Yep. And it's not preventing you from making a better pass, making a better decision or whatever. Yeah. And so for me, it mattered more that she's on a team like this, has experiences like this, because this is helping her grow. I don't care that she's not, at Spooky Nook winning, whatever championship against this team, or playing in the Monroe Rear League or whatever. And to circle back to something you said earlier, like, she's already playing against high school kids. Mm-hmm. Jackson's so funny because at the summer camp, he thinks he's playing against the high school kids. And what's funny is I actually caught one or two of them. Like, I saw like on their face, like, oh, this is cute. Like, this kid wants to play. And, they were having like a shooting contest or whatever. And by the end of it, like, you could tell he was actually shooting. Like, he was, going for it. And so I love that because when Sarah, hopefully, I'm assuming she's going to Raritan. I can't wait for her to try out for the team. Yeah. And if she makes it, like, I love that she's not going to crumble because she's already at 7th grade playing against all these older kids, But just from your perch as a coach, is there anything that you would recommend or any solutions you see that might help with this? Because I feel like from the top down, I do think things are changing. And I know, at least on the boys' side, I know Coach Rosner, he mentioned it at the banquet. Like, he's specifically trying to help develop a pipeline. He is showing up at the middle school practices and games. He's bringing the kids for varsity to come and cheer them on. And I think it's incremental. So even if you just get that connection, that's going to help. Do you think it's something that might happen on the girls' side too? connect to the middle school or something?
We're trying. We are. I think that there's a lot that goes into it for sure. I think that would be starting that, just the connection between the high school and the middle school, I think would be huge because it just shows the continuity. Like when you see the high schoolers come down and they're there and they're present at your practices, even if it's just for 10, 20 minutes, you know, it does matter. I remember when I was in middle school, the high schoolers would come, or if we knew the high school coach was coming at the time, Coach Bull, we'd be like, oh my gosh, he's coming. Like, this could be a tryout. It wasn't. But he was just coming to see because it's important to show the support for each other, especially, and again, not to make it girls, boys, but especially for the girls.
No, especially.
It really is important. And it's funny, I took a couple of the high school players and I went down to some of my students' practices, and it just reminded me, like, the look on their faces and, like, how they were just in awe of these things. Obviously, my girls are shooting on the lower rim, so of course they're going to make it in all the time, but it was so cute. And I'm like, that's still the same for the middle schoolers. They look up to you, you know, and they don't care what your record is. If they come and see you play, you have 20 points, it's so important to them, you know? So we're trying. We really are. And there's a lot of different things in the works. I know we do the youth night and things like that. We started that up, I think, 2 years ago. It's hard. And a lot of people have to buy in, and I'm not sure if we're quite there yet. I see a lot of times in all sports, people like their islands, because when you're on an island, then you don't have judgment, you don't have criticism, things like that. And it's really no one in specifically, really, but a lot of people are on islands, and they like it that way. And it's hard to kind of break that. But yeah, we're definitely, yeah.
And I think that's a polite way of also skirting the fact that a lot of times, especially if it's with guys, there's egos involved, and that can be a huge hurdle to overcome. And it's funny that you mentioned that, though, about the reaction and stuff. So I don't remember which practice it was, and I don't remember if Tim was practicing with freshmen or JV, whatever it was. Some of the girls from your team were participating.
Yes.
And Angela in particular dropped Tim, and I don't know if it was with I don't remember if it was with a screen or just some really aggressive defense, but like he felt it, and it was funny. Like,
that's so funny.
Yeah, but he loved the opportunity to compete against a like, you know, she was the real deal. And again, it was hoops. It didn't matter, boy, girl, you know, whatever. Like, she was there, and you know, so I love that there's that forward thinking aspect and understanding, like, hey, this helps the younger kids or the kids on, you know, the different level teams and stuff. Again, across genders. And like, I just love that you work with male coaches. I love that there's like the crossover, because again, too, right? Like, I would love to see more female coaches for boys programs, because I think that would go a huge distance.
Oh, for sure.
In terms of just changing perceptions and whatnot. But even more important than that is having female coaches for female players. Because that's, like, again, it's weird for me as a guy, as a dad of a daughter, like, I can't help, you know, the gender thing. So when I'm coaching, I'm always going to be a guy coaching.
Right.
But I see, and listen, the girls that I've gotten the opportunity to coach, whether it's, you know, travel or rec or AAU, they're always respectful. It's always great. But when I'm able to watch a female coach and just look at the faces, look at the way they're, you know, listening intently, especially with somebody like Dawn, and just her, she's like a larger than life presence now, you know, and having those role models specifically, I think it's great. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing a phenomenal job at all levels across the board.
Thank you.
I really hope that, you know, Sarah does get to go to Raritan and get to play for you. Maybe for both sports. I'm going to pick your brain about something with volleyball in a second, but I really appreciate you giving up some of your time to come chat on the podcast. I think this was awesome. And, you know, Jackson's always a huge fan. So he was, that made his night getting to see you, you know, beforehand. So thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening wherever and whenever you are.